So you might be aware that last month Warner Brothers released the film Mortal Kombat. This is actually the third Mortal Kombat film to be made. The first one came out in 1995 and a sequel came out in 1997. The series was originally envisioned as a trilogy, but the sequel film, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, performed so poorly that a third film was not made. Also, around that same time that a third film would have gone into production, Midway Games, the maker of Mortal Kombat, was filing for bankruptcy, and Warner Brothers, who was producing the Mortal Kombat films, was in the process of acquiring New Line Cinema. The Mortal Kombat franchise sat in development hell for years, so eventually the decision was made to just reboot the series rather than continue it. Personally, I liked this new Mortal Kombat film. I went into it expecting only two things. One, that the characters from Mortal Kombat would be there, and two, that they would fight. And both of those things happened, so I was thoroughly pleased. It's just a nice, violent, entertaining film, and I hope a lot of people watch it so that it gets greenlit for a sequel, because Johnny Cage, Katana, and Reptile were not in this movie, so obviously they're only going to appear on the big screen if we get greenlit for a sequel. But a Mortal Kombat sequel brings me to my main point. Remember how I mentioned that after the release of Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Midway Games filed for bankruptcy? Well, around 2009, Warner Brothers acquired the film licensing rights for pretty much all Midway games. So far, Warner Brothers has only released two films based on Midway Games, 2018's Rampage and 2021's Mortal Kombat. I have not seen Rampage. I know Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is in it, and I know that it showed on screen too at my hometown's drive-in theater, because when my friends and I went to the drive-in, we went to screen 1, where we saw Ocean's 8 and Deadpool 2. But both Rampage and Mortal Kombat turned a profit, so I think there's some real potential here that Warner Brothers could expand the MCU, the Midway Cinematic Universe. So I'm here to pitch some ideas for the MCU. Pitch 1. My first pitch is a trilogy. It's an adaptation of Galaga, Galaxian, and Space Invaders. All three of these games differ slightly in gameplay. I think that Galaga is the most fun to play out of the three of them. But they're all games where you are a space pilot in your spaceship firing your space guns at space aliens. So I think all of these games are similar enough in concept that they could be adapted as a trilogy. I think the film should be set in the future after the first contact with the aliens, and our protagonist should be like a bright-eyed young kid who's excited to go to space and be a fighter space pilot, and maybe his dad or older brother is also a space pilot. If it's his dad, he should already be dead at the start of the movie. If it's his brother, then we should definitely fridge him at some point, have him go out in a blaze of glory to further develop the character of our protagonist. Other characters can include war-hardened general who softens over time as he comes to see the protagonist as like a surrogate kid. As far as overall plot for the trilogy, we have some options. We could go the traditional space invasion route, a la Independence Day or Mars Attacks. We could do a slight inversion of the trope, get into some moral gray area of who the bad guys really are in any war, a la Ender's Game. Or we could do something like the Berrytown trilogy, where each film in the franchise follows a different generation fighting in this war. Or similarly, each subsequent film could focus on a supporting character that was introduced in the first film. We don't have to have the whole thing ironed out right now. These are just pitches, but we definitely need to have a roadmap established before we start production, because if you don't do that, you can end up confusing and upsetting your audience, like with the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Pitch 2. Second pitch is PacMan. There's already been animated PacMan series. Hanna-Barbera did one in the 80s and Disney did one in the 2010s. This is the only pitch that I'm going to say has to be animated. I do not want to see live-action PacMan on the big screen. No creepy CGI Uncanny Valley Pac-Man, just standard animated Pac-Man. I think the animation style should be a mix of 3D and 2D, maybe with the characters being primarily rendered in 3D and the background being in a 2D style that's more pixel-esque. I think that could be very visually interesting to look at. Also, I think if we want to do something that no one's ever seen before with this franchise, we're going to have to do something that Hollywood has really been in favor of recently. We gotta do a gritty, dark remake. For the film, we could have either Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man be the protagonist of the film. It changes literally nothing with the plot. For this example, I'm gonna go ahead and just have Pac-Man be our protagonist, and then when we get greenlit for a sequel, it can star Ms. Pac-Man. Anyways, the Pacs are married. They're living that married life. PacMan goes out of town for the night. Doing what? It doesn't matter. But while he's gone, the house is broken into, and Miss PacMan is killed. A dark start for the movie, I know, but remember, this is a gritty, dark remake. PacMan comes home to find his wife murdered, and he vows to take revenge on those who were responsible for her death. In her final moments of life, Miss PacMan managed to write a clue to her murder on the floor with her own blood. A single word: ghosts. That's right, Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde were responsible for this murder, so PacMan vows to hunt them down and kill them all one by one. Somehow cherries will be involved, like either the weapon he uses will be called cherry, or he'll take some kind of substance that makes him really strong right before killing the ghosts, and that'll be called cherry. So yeah, PacMan hunts them down one by one and kills them to avenge his wife. And if you're like, Emily, that sounds really familiar. A man hunting down a group of people after they broke into his house and killed a loved one? Where have I heard this before? Well, I mean, this film is basically going to be John Wick, but animated. Pitch 3. Gauntlet, I feel, is going to be the easiest to adapt because it already has lore, so I'm just going to read you the gameplay summary from Wikipedia. In ages past, a corrupt mage named Garm used a set of rune stones to summon a demon named Scorn. However, Scorn crushed Garm and imprisoned his soul in the underworld. Scorn, fearing the power of the runestones, scattered them throughout the 4 realms so that they could never be used against him. The players must defeat the end bosses of each of the 4 kingdoms to obtain the 4 keys which allow access to the desecrated temple and be able to banish Scorn to the underworld. While traveling through each realm, they must also collect the 13 runestones from where they have been scattered. The complete set of runestones allow them to pursue Scorn to the underworld in order to finally destroy him. So that's basically going to be the film. And our 4 main characters will be based off of the 4 playable characters from the game. So we will have a warrior, a wizard, an archer, and a Valkyrie. The aesthetic of this is very high fantasy, which I think could really work to its benefit. D&D is insanely popular right now. People live stream their campaigns on Twitch. There are podcasts about it. And honestly, the last big blockbuster to have that kind of high fantasy aesthetic was Lord of the Rings, and it's been long enough since those films came out that this wouldn't feel like an oversaturation of the market or a ripoff. We could either do the whole run of our protagonist getting the 13 runestones and going through the 4 realms in one film, or we could split it into 4 films with each realm getting its own film. Honestly, I don't think it would be that hard to make this a 4-film franchise. I mean, they made The Hobbit into 3 films, and that's based on a book that's barely over 300 pages. Like, it will actually take you less time to just read The Hobbit than to watch all 3 Hobbit movies. So I think we can make Gauntlet into a fantasy 4-part epic very easily. I think it would be fun. And having 4 films with 4 main characters means that each film could focus on a specific character. Having each film focus on one character would allow the characters to be a little more fleshed out and would give more time to develop those character relationships and dynamics. And who doesn't love a magical action-adventure fantasy film? Nobody, that's who. Everybody loves them. Pitch 4. Pitch 4 is kind of another fantasy film. It's Joust. If you've never played Joust, the gameplay is that you are a yellow knight riding an ostrich, like in the Swiss Family Robinson, and you're jumping around these platforms above a lava pit, fighting knights riding buzzards. When the game is in 2-player mode, player 2 is a blue knight on a stork. I think this would really work as a Chosen One movie. You have a protagonist who doesn't feel like they're anything special, but is maybe always longing to be something more. They don't quite fit in with anyone, and they're not really sure why. And it's because they're the Yellow Knight, destined to ride an ostrich into battle and fight the enemy knights. I think this would work best if the protagonist came from outside the world of Joust, more of an Alice in Wonderland, Chronicles of Narnia type of setup. The protagonist is transported or finds a portal to Joust, and in entering the realm fulfills the prophecy of the Yellow Knight, destined to defeat the Buzzard Knights and save the kingdom. There will be a warrior who's about the same age as the protagonist who will train them in preparation of their battle. This is our Blue Knight on a stork, and maybe there's gonna be a little bit of romance involved, we'll see. The climax of the film will be the Yellow Knight and the Blue Knight, and maybe some supporting troops so that we can get a big CGI shot of the battlefield going to war in the lava lands. Also in Joust, the game, Sometimes a pterodactyl appears to hunt the player. The leader of the Buzzard Knights, I don't know, maybe their king, who will be an original character for the film, will either ride a pterodactyl into battle or by means of dark magic will transform into a pterodactyl for battle. Also in Joust, the game, the disembodied hand of an indestructible lava troll grabs you if you get too close to the lava and pulls you in. This character will be like a neutral party, but will be instrumental in the defeat of the Pterodactyl King. Our hero will trick the Pterodactyl King into flying too close and low to the lava, and he'll get grabbed and killed. The lava troll will obviously be voiced by some well-known older actor, so that after you see the movie and you're watching the credits, you can go, "Oh, I didn't know Anthony Hopkins voiced the lava troll. I thought he sounded familiar." Pitch 5. Tapper is a game where you are a bartender and you're serving drinks to patrons and you have to get their drinks to them before they become impatient and leave. You also have to catch the glasses that they slide down the bar to you once they finish drinking before they hit the floor and break, and you also have to collect tips that are left by the patrons. You might be like, that doesn't sound like anything that would make an interesting movie. Okay, well, sometimes a group of can-can girls appear and distract the patrons. So for our movie Tapper, we make it a Western. Tapper runs the local saloon, and he's recruited by the sheriff to hunt down an outlaw. Tapper's backstory can be one of the following. 1. He used to be in law enforcement before retiring to run the saloon. Maybe he changed careers because an outlaw got away from him. Maybe it's that same outlaw that he's now being recruited to help hunt down. 2. Tapper used to be a cowboy before settling down, and he's the best shot in town, which is why the sheriff is recruiting him. 3. Tapper used to be an outlaw before turning to an honest life, and the sheriff thinks that he needs someone that can think like an outlaw in order to catch an outlaw. Any of these would work, and it's something that would be revealed a little over halfway into the film. It'll be hinted at and alluded to throughout the film so that the audience can play along at home, but eventually the truth about Tapper will be revealed in a very dramatic fashion. Before it's revealed, we'll have various moments throughout the film where Tapper does something really cool to hint at his mysterious past, like he'll do a really cool trick shot with his pistol, or he'll beat up a bunch of guys and someone will be like, "Who are you?" And he'll be like, "I'm just a barkeep." I think this could be a very fun movie, and it'd be very reminiscent of old spaghetti westerns. It'd be very self-indulgent. It's been a long time since there was a cowboy film up on the big screen. The last one I can think of is 2011's Cowboys vs. Aliens. I saw that in theaters. So yeah, we've gone a while without a cowboy film. It would be refreshing and exciting to have one in theaters again. It'll be wholesome fun for the whole family, but it will probably get a PG-13 rating because of all the guns and alcohol. Paperboy the movie. Paperboy is a game where you are a paperboy delivering papers on your paper route, and the arcade game has bicycle handlebars for the controller, so you have to actually steer a bike while you play. This movie will be 100% marketed on nostalgia. Think Stand By Me, The Sandlot, even The Goonies. This film is going to be very nostalgic for Gen X. A story taking place in a time when you could have a paper route, and you could spend all summer riding around town with your friends on bikes, and you could buy cigarettes out of vending machines. I think this movie should be very fun, with the goal of becoming a cult classic. It's got to have a killer soundtrack of era-specific music. I'm thinking 1980s since the game came out in 85. Like I said, this is totally for Gen X. It's going to be very heavy on 80s nostalgia. The film will have that classic plot setup of need to raise money to save something, like the local pizza parlor or arcade is going to get shut down unless Paperboy and his friends raise enough money in time. This beloved local place is going to be sold to the mean land developer unless we get enough money by the end of the month. Our group of childhood friend protagonists will have a clubhouse they hang out in, and they'll have a board with all their different ideas on how to raise money on it, and they'll have a comically large jar that they put the money they raise in so that we can have a visualization of how close they are to reaching their goal. Maybe they'll try some other gigs before settling on a paper route. We can have a montage of them trying all these different jobs, like mowing lawns or walking dogs or babysitting, and obviously hilarity and hijinks ensue. After the montage, we'll have a scene of them like back at the clubhouse really disheartened because they weren't good at any of the jobs they tried and they don't know how they're going to raise money. And then our protagonist Paperboy will like crumple up a piece of paper and throw it into the trash can and it'll land perfectly. And all of his friends will be like, do that again. So they have him like keep making shots and they realize that he has really good aim and he knows how to ride a bike. So a paper route makes perfect sense. I like this plot because you can have an adult be an antagonist, and adult antagonists in films where the protagonists are kids are so fun to watch. They are so over the top. Because it's an adult that has beef with a group of 12-year-olds, so the performance has to be really hammy and so entertaining. And like with all movies with the plotline of raising money to save something, it'll be the 11th hour and they'll realize that they don't quite have enough money. They'll be like $100 short. But then the town comes together to get them that last bit of money they need. We could have people that we saw earlier in the jobs montage being like, oh, I never paid you all the way for mowing my lawn. Here's $10. And everyone does that and they raise enough money and the business is saved. But it'll just be a nostalgic, fun romp through the 1980s with jokes and hijinks and childhood friendship and a paper route. So yeah, those are my pitches for the MCU, the Midway Cinematic Universe. Let me know what you thought of my pitches down in the comments, and if you're from Warner Brothers and you want to contact me about any of my ideas, please do so. You can reach me by phone at 570-1. So obviously, once the MCU, the Midway Cinematic Universe, gets going, we'll want to eventually plan for a crossover film, because crossovers are really big in pop culture right now. Into the Spider-Verse, Seussical the Musical, Super Smash Bros. And Midway released a series of games throughout the 90s where you were an NBA player. The game NBA Jam might sound familiar to some of you. So I think we should basically just do Space Jam, but with Midway arcade characters. And I think we should have Shaquille O'Neal be our human basketball player because he already does acting, so I think it would be very easy to convince him to be in this film. Also, he's released 4 studio albums, which means he could provide vocals on not only the main theme, but the credits song as well. 2 birds, 1 stone, having Shaquille O'Neal be the human basketball player in the Midway Cinematic Universe Space Jam knockoff.